I call to order this regular meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District. It is January 11th, 2022, and the time is 6:01 p.m. Vice President Sanowski, will you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Yes.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I will have a roll call starting from my far right.
Zach Lindsay.
Libby Hart-Wells.
Jan Michael Greenberg.
Julie Sanowski.
And Patty Beckman. All members are present, and we do have a quorum. Okay, do any board members have changes to the agenda? Okay. I move to approve the agenda as presented. Do I have a second?
Second.
Board Member Sanowski seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0. All right, we move now to our first action item, 3A, the election of the governing board officers. Just for a moment, I am withdrawing from consideration for the position of president or vice president. This year, my daughters will begin their senior year, and I need to give them all of the attention and my focus they deserve. Do I have any nominations for the role of president? Board Member Hart-Wells.
Thank you, President Beckman. I wish to nominate Vice President Julie Sanowski for Board President. Ms. Sanowski has worn more hats in this Scottsdale Unified School District, more than any of us at this dais, giving her a unique perspective and institutional knowledge. From all indications, that perspective and knowledge will serve the district well in the upcoming months.
Vice President Sanowski, do you accept this nomination?
Thank you for those kind words, Dr. Hart-Wells. And yes, I do accept that nomination.
Do you have anything else you would like to say?
Sure. I think it's very important right now that it's understood that being a strong leader is challenging when things are running smoothly. I'm confident that this team has great potential and I will work hard to support these unique abilities and qualities of each of these governing board members that I've had the pleasure of working with. And recognizing our goals, that they are to really support every student in our district. I feel that is an objective of everyone sitting here this evening. And I think we must continue to work together. We have a team in Scottsdale that I think sometimes gets overlooked. Recognizing our goal, it's important for everyone to understand that the school staff, administrators, parents and guardians, and community members must work together towards a common goal for all of our students. The work must be done appropriately, timely, according to regulations, and we must work, again, together to ensure our team members get the support they need to thrive. I realize this isn't an easy task. I have always been up for a task. When we add the external complications of community unrest, a worldwide health pandemic, continued budgetary cuts and shortfalls, the need to navigate facts swiftly yet smoothly, being a strong leader is even more difficult. I am willing to work through these challenges with you all as teammates and request your support as governing board president.
Thank you. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Do I have a second for Board Member Sanowski?
Second.
Board Member Greenberg seconds. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Board Member Sanowski is now President Sanowski as the motion passes 5-0. And we will take a 2-minute break.
I reconvene this meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. At this time, I'd like to take nominations for the officer of Vice President. Do I have any nominations for that role? Board Member Greenberg?
I would like to nominate Board Member Lindsay as Vice President.
Other nominations?
I would like to nominate Board Member Hartwells.
Any other nominations at this time? Okay. Board Member Lindsay, would you like to share a few words?
I just don't know if I have the time commitment for that role, so I would have to decline.
Board Member Lindsay declines the nomination. Dr. Hartwells?
I will accept the nomination, and I thank you for the nomination.
At this time, we will vote for the role of Vice President of, yes,
Board President Sanowski, could I request a roll call vote, please?
sure.
Thank you.
A roll call vote has been requested. Zach Lindsay?
Aye.
Dr. Hartwells?
Aye.
And Michael Greenberg?
Nay. I won't go into the reasons here because I don't think that would be appropriate, but nay.
My vote is a yes. Board Member Beckman?
Yes. President Zanowski, I think you failed to get a second. So if you want to be
Thank
the
you.
second, why don't you?
Second for her nomination.
Correct.
Yes. Pardon me. I'm a little new to this. Let's back up. Second for the nomination for Dr. Hartwells as Vice President.
And then I'm not sure, you can ask Lori, I don't think you need to revote, but it's up to you.
Go through it again.
Do the whole thing again.
Yes.
Okay. Do I have a second for the nomination for Board Member Hartwells?
You just gave it, I thought. Didn't you, you seconded the nomination, she accepted the nomination.
Yes, I did.
But, so she had so Board Member Lindsay nominated her.
Right.
You seconded it. Now we
Right.
need to do a vote, and then we're good.
I thought we did that.
Well, I think she needs us to
Formally,
redo
you
it again.
formally had to second it, which was
Right.
not clear for the minutes.
Got it.
Before the vote took place.
Got it. Okay, let's revote then. Board Member Lindsay?
Aye.
Dr. Hartwells?
Aye.
Board Member Greenberg?
Nay.
Board Member Beckman?
Aye.
And my vote is also a yes. We have a 4-1 decision in favor of Board Member Hartwells becoming the Vice President of our Scottsdale Unified School District Governing Board. Congratulations. We will move on to information and discussion items. 4A, annual open meeting law training. And Lori is leading that discussion. Council?
Good evening. I'm going to try to stay in one place. I tend to wander when I speak, but at least I can see over this podium and I can see all of you. Good evening. Welcome to our annual open meeting law training. This is required, so bear with me. There will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation. And you can also stop me if it's a burning question in the middle of a section, please. So what's the purpose of open meeting law? Open meeting law is a public policy of the state of Arizona and pretty much every other state in the United States as well as the country that states that meetings of public bodies, such as this public body, have to be conducted openly and that notices and agendas should be provided for such meetings that contain information so that the public is reasonably informed of what's going to happen at the meeting. I'm not going to go through, you guys can all read, so I'm not going to go through these verbatim. It is what I call a sunshine provision and what somebody else has called the goldfish theory, whereas meetings are conducted in the open so that the public is aware of what is happening within their public body. The public has a right to know is kind of the mantra that overrides all of this. And the legislature and courts have repeatedly reinforced that the public has a right to know how government operates and how decisions are made. In Arizona, the two main vehicles to accomplish this are our open meeting law, which is why we're doing a training, and Arizona public records law, which is an entirely separate training that we will not be going into today. And as an aside, the governing board doesn't fulfill its own public records request. The district does that for you. Meetings shall be open to the public, and all legal actions of the public are to occur in that public meeting, and we're going to get to what those definitions are next. This is the definition of a meeting. A meeting is a gathering, and a gathering doesn't have to be in person. You can gather electronically. We can gather on Zoom. We can also gather through our devices, as we'll get to later, through emails and things like that. When you gather as a quorum, and in this case a quorum would be 3 since there is 5 of you, you either discuss legal action, propose legal action, take legal action, or deliberate with respect to such actions. If you are gathering for another purpose, you're going to a dinner, you're going to watch a play perhaps that one of our schools is putting on. You just happen to all be in the same place for a non-meeting reason where you're not going to do any of those 4 things, you are not holding a meeting. A meeting also includes one-way electronic communication. That's text and that's emails that you may send out to a quorum, at least 3 members of the board, that involves a discussion, deliberation, or the taking of legal action. This would not be a scheduling type of text or email or something that doesn't involve the purpose of the public body or the mission, let's say, of the public body. That would be excluded from the definition of a meeting. The best practice is to try to minimize the outreach of one board member to a quorum outside of a meeting if you want to discuss, deliberate, or, telegraph a vote or take any kind of legal action. Here's the definition of legal action. The easy one is it's a decision, right? You take a vote on an item, you've taken a legal action. But it's also a commitment or promise made by the public body. So if 3 of you get together and say, we all commit or we all promise to do X, Y, and Z, that's also a legal action, which is why it has to be done in an open meeting. And again, it includes discussions or consultations amongst the members regarding matters that may foreseeably require final action or final decision. So that doesn't mean that it's definitely on the agenda for the next meeting. It's things that are within your scope of responsibility. Budget, for example, you're always going to make budget decisions, so you're probably not going to have discussions or consultations on a specific budgetary matter. I'm not talking about a general, global, oh my goodness, the budget, how are we going to fill our gaps? But you're not going to have specific discussions on matters that may come before you. When we have a meeting, we always publish a notice, right? And that notice has to be accessible. It has to tell the public where we're meeting, when we're meeting, what we're discussing, and it can't be cryptic. We need to let the public know what we're doing it, when we're doing it, and where we're doing it. And this is on here just as a reminder that when we send out those notices, or even when we have presentations like this one, that it has to be accessible to everyone, including people with disabilities. So although this presentation right here may look pretty boring because it's in black and white, it's also accessible by those who use screen readers. And we don't have to provide alt text because I didn't fancy up my presentation. There are ways to make nicer looking presentations accessible, but this one is a very stark example of something that would be accessible to everyone who would want to see the presentation or watch it online. This is another definition of legal action that is taken from the Attorney General's handbook, and we had discussed that in the slide. The key word, again, as you see, is foreseeable. Advisory committee. So you're not meeting in a meeting. It's an advisory committee that the board has officially established. You've decided you need an advisory committee for something. And you have members of the governing board on that committee. And it's for the specific purpose of making a recommendation to you about a specific decision that needs to be made. We have policies regarding advisory committees, and they're being followed. An advisory committee is not when the superintendent has a meeting with his staff around something. That is not an advisory committee. Oops, there it goes. Curriculum adoption committees are required by statute, and so therefore they must follow open meeting law, as well as the new sex ed curriculum has some open meeting law provisions as well. And curriculum adoption committees do make recommendations to you. They look at all the curriculum and make a recommendation to you as to what they believe the board should adopt as a curriculum. If you have a discussion with less than a majority of the board, 2 of you are talking about something, that's okay, as long as you're not doing it to circumvent the purposes of the open meeting law. It's very hard to just have a conversation with 2 people that remains with 2 people, which leads to what we call serial conversations or splintering the board. That means maybe only 2 of you discuss, but then somebody else comes and has that same discussion, and now you bring in another person, and instead you didn't meet as a quorum. There were never 3 of you all together or on an email or a text, but yet all of you have had the discussion together. That's a violation of open meeting law. Sometimes it's not intentional, but that's why we always caution you about the reply alls on emails discussing substantive issues. So that's the one graphic, the big caution sign there, is to just be careful about how many people you're having conversations with. You also are not allowed to direct any of the staff to commit an open meeting law violation, so use us as proxies. The superintendent in particular shouldn't go out and poll other board members as to what they think about a particular issue, and then telegraph that to another board member and another board member, so that really they're just an agent of the board, and that would violate open meeting law as well. I have no indication that that's ever happened here, but it is in the open meeting law training that I should give you. So here's an interesting question. May board members discuss issues or express opinions to the public outside of a properly noticed meeting? And the answer to that is yes, they may do that. If you are at a school giving, you've been asked to hand out an award, you've been asked to talk to the public, you've been asked to show up for whatever reason, maybe it's on your own Facebook page or whatever, you are allowed to have an opinion. We don't expect you to be never discussing anything that has to do with education. That's not what open meeting law is about. So as long as the opinion is not directed at another one of you, and there's not a plan, you're not setting this up to telegraph or solicit support for a particular vote purposely, you are allowed to express an opinion in a public forum. We're going to sum it up really quick, what I just went over, and then we're going to move on to something else fairly quickly. This is what the public's allowed to know. This is what open meeting law is all about. Where, what, and the reasons. There are exceptions to open meeting law. This is the fishbowl I was talking about. I wish I could take credit for the fishbowl analogy. I cannot. Credit goes to someone else for that. Versus just a meeting in a room without the public being able to view the meeting. And the big exception to that is executive session. And we've gone into executive session, and sometimes the public is confused about that, and it seems like we're deliberating on an issue. I'm trying not to wonder. We deliberate in an issue secretly. That's not what's happening in an executive session. An executive session is for a very structured purpose, and there are limited legal reasons as to why the board can go into executive session and what they can do there. It's when a quorum of members of the public body meet outside of the view of the public. And there's 7 reasons that you can do that. Personnel discussions. That information is confidential by statute. The public doesn't have a right to know the details of a personnel matter. It violates the privacy of the employee and some other reasons. Confidential records. Maybe there's some records that are confidential by law that you need to look at for one reason or another, and you're allowed to look at those in executive session or discuss those. Legal advice. You're allowed to ask general counsel or outside counsel for legal advice on a matter. Information about ongoing litigation or contract negotiations, settlement discussions, those things you can talk about in an executive session. Salary discussions, that's not something whether you're discussing how much a certain employee should make or a class of employees. And discussions regarding international, interstate, or tribal negotiations, that's probably one of the least used exceptions, but it's there. And also a discussion regarding the purchase, sale, or lease of real property. However, you can discuss these things. You can have information presented to you. You can seek legal advice. What you cannot do is vote or discuss those things that should be public in that executive session. You can't all poll each other and say, okay, now we're going to go out into the meeting and here's what we're going to do. Being an executive session is really a way for you to hear information that the public doesn't have a right to hear, usually by statute, but you're not allowed to take action in an executive session. So that brings us to the call to the public or public comment. If you noticed as I went through all of this, there wasn't anything mentioned about public comment. That's because public comment is not mentioned in open meeting law. Public comment is not required of a school board. You do not have to require it. We, however, do require it currently by policy. And if we have public comment, because the public has a right to attend and listen to the board meetings, it is a meeting in public, not a public meeting, but not the right to speak. If you do decide to include a call to the public, there are certain limitations and structure that you can place around that, and those are generally laid out in policy, including limiting the amount of time and things like that, the amount of speakers. You could limit the topic if that's laid out in your policy, and some other things. If the members of the public are allowed to speak, and they do speak, there are only certain actions that the board can take. You cannot engage in a back and forth discussion with the person that is speaking or take action on the matter raised. Why? Because it wasn't properly noticed on the agenda. If they're speaking about something that's properly noticed, then you're going to take action on that appropriately under the open meeting law. But if it's something that's not noticed, you would be in violation of open meeting law by addressing that. And you can respond to criticism, or you can, if you hear something, you can ask the staff to look into it, to review the matter. That's been done before. Or if you feel like it's something that you do want to have a discussion about in a meeting, you can request that it be put on a future agenda. If your open meeting law is violated, the penalties are actually pretty stiff. The AG does not look fondly on open meeting law violations. They are the body that investigates the open meeting law violations. All legal action taken outside of a open meeting is null and void, no matter how good it may be. It is null and void, and then you have a certain time period to go back and ratify that action if you slip up and take legal action outside of that open meeting, or you take action on something, for example, that wasn't on the agenda. That's more likely to happen than your meeting in secret. The court may impose a civil penalty up to $500 for the second offense and up to $2,500 for the third and subsequent offenses. That comes out of the budget of the person who violated open meeting law. It's not a district responsibility. The court may also order payment of attorney's fees and costs. The public body may not pay these costs and attorney's fees. If the court determines a public officer violated the public meeting law with the intent, not just any old violation, but there was kind of malicious intent to deprive the public of information, then they may remove the public officer from office, and there's due process safeguards in place and all of that to prevent that from happening. That was 25 slides in a really short amount of time. Are there any questions that I can answer for you? If there's, try to be, don't name names or anything like that, but if there are general questions that I can answer for you, I'm happy to do that.
Board Member Beckman?
Back to the curriculum adoption slide. Okay. How do we notice this?
You would notice it the same way you would post on your website. You would
Okay.
post, provide, I believe, Fortis
Right.
provides copies to the schools so that any member of the public that wants to know that that curriculum adoption meeting is happening, it might be, and you can post it in a variety of places, as long as the public has sufficient notice so that they can come and watch that committee in action. There are also members of the public on those committees
And
as
so
well.
that's what I mean. Every meeting that, or every time the committee meets, there's going to be a posted notice about this, correct? I'm doing this to-
Curriculum committees,
Okay.
yes.
Okay, perfect. One next question. On the slide for OML offenses, can you explain that? Didn't make sense to me. What is the first offense? Just nothing? Or it said $500 for the second offense? And
I think you might be found in violation, but you wouldn't get fined.
Okay. Oh, well,
But
okay.
the action would still be null and void, and you'd either have to ratify it or just, it would,
I just was making sure it wasn't a
It would be
typo.
null and void.
I didn't see what the first offense. Okay.
I
thank you.
apologize for not being clear on that.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? No? Counselor Byrd, thank you for your presentation
you.
on open meeting law.
There you go. Thank you.
We will move on to information discussion item 4B, Esser update, and I believe that will be presented by Dr. Kim Guerin, Shannon Crozier, and Alice Bengola.
Actually, Alice Bengola, our ESSER coordinator, is going to take the lead in the presentation this evening, and Ms. Crozier is in the cloud, but may not have much of a voice to answer questions, but I think Alice is prepared to cover the bulk of the presentation this evening.
I am. Good evening, board members. We're very excited about our ESSER activity this past semester. You will see a review of ESSER 1. I believe some of this will look familiar to you from our previous presentation. ESSER 1 was allocated $2,039,036, and the remaining $226,000 will be used for summer school and summer school programming. We anticipate the summer school programming will be slightly more than that, and we will use ESSER 2 funding for that. So as you can see, employee pay was continuation of pay for employees in the spring of 2020, and we specifically moved M&O pay to this grant to allow for a greater M&O carry forward into FY 2021. And you can see that the grant also required us to use a portion of our allocation for private school use. Next slide is Esser 2. Again, some of this may look familiar, although one thing with Esser is that things do change from time to time, and we do make revisions to this. But our district was given $8.4 million, and we have currently spent a little over $6.6 million from this grant. The largest expenditure was the retention stipend that we made at $2.6 million. Community education support was allocated $2.4 million, and our summer school was $542,000. Our facility needs included the higher MERV filters for all locations, the electrostatic sprayers, the additional cafeteria tables for social distancing, and all the water bottle filler stations that were installed. You can see that there is $1.7 million encumbered for this year and anticipated as encumbered for next year. These encumbrances are for addressing our learning loss, such as SOL, the additional staff for that, COVID support positions for this year and next school year, and the anticipated facility needs and summer programming that continues. The learning loss has been paid for a safe place to learn, gifted materials, PRISM learning that you'll see a little bit later in the presentation, and tutoring. Technology was also used to purchase, or funds were also used to purchase technology such as laptops for our new social workers. The vaccination clinics were for water, nurses, and security. Esser 3 is still being developed, and we are using some of the funds for our proposals. We were allocated $19 million, and this funding will be going until September 30th of 2024. $851,000 has been spent to date, and we need to keep in mind that we have Esser 1 and 2 that end this September and September of 2023. So the majority of expenditures are being used from those grants before we deplete Esser 3. The largest expenditures are in learning loss at $522,000, and online learning, such for SOL's additional staff. We anticipate expenditures for the remainder of this year as well as for fiscal 22-23 and 23-24. So you can see while this shows an unencumbered balance of $9.3 million, $5 million is set aside for contingencies and future budget support if needed. We anticipate reducing those budgets next year after we reach the 40-day mark and have a better picture of the actual ADM and community education balances. Technology has just under $2 million still available, and we anticipate a large portion of that to be used for the one-to-one devices needed for students and for staff. Facilities will continue to look at what is needed to keep schools clean and safe, and we anticipate the continued use of the higher MERV filters for the classrooms. Facilities is also using funds for additional custodial needs during lunch to keep the cafeterias clean. That was Mrs. Crozier's portion of the financials. So we're going to go into digging a little bit deeper into how we've used the Esser funds to address learning loss. We have three ways in which we have accessed Esser funds. One is programs or initiatives by the district, such as iReady and our tutoring programs from our SUSD teachers and varsity tutors, our summer school programs, and a pilot called Prisms of Reality that's being tested in the Coronado complex with Coronado and Tanalea. Proposals are also submitted by school or by an individual, and I'll be going into some detail in the next few slides for that. In addition, we've had parents and Esser committee members discuss their ideas and what they see as possible needs or enhancements for the district. What we've done here is divide up the Esser proposals and the Esser spending by learning community. And you'll see at the end of this that there are many ways that we've spent Esser across the district. But here, Coronado, you'll see that Coronado Learning Community with Coronado High School, Tanalea, and Hohokam have received funding for personnel to work with students that need additional support in the areas of math and reading. Hohokam also participated in an outdoor STEM lab in conjunction with ASU, and you'll see that a few more of our schools have also done this. They also created a novel way to help students who are experiencing high anxiety and difficulty with their emotions, and they have created calming sensory stations in which it includes things like fidgets and weighted vests and things that will help them calm down. They've included that in each building so they have access to it, and they've been working with Ms. McDonald for that. In Desert Mountain, you'll see that they have also used their funds for tutoring as well as for a reading specialist. And Mountainside Middle School has been working with Not My Kid to help some students with social skills and their emotional skills as well. This next slide shows Chaparral. Chaparral's learning community has worked using math and reading specialists to support their students. They, in Sequoia, they have hired a 0.5 math specialist and 0.5 reading specialist. Copper Ridge is on the brink of hiring an interventionist. I will say at this time, finding that staff and those qualified staff members has been a challenge and has delayed some of these interventions from happening, but we are still actively searching for those individuals. The Arcadia complex, Arcadia High School has started CSI, which is not the CSI from the TV show, but it's compensatory strategic intervention for math skills to help those students, especially the freshmen, with their math skills. Tavan, as you heard in the presentation earlier this year, ran an intervention institute for reading and math. And in Saguaro, at Kiva, Mr. Gromack worked to develop PLC teams and really work with teachers to identify student needs and how we were going to take the curriculum that the students might have missed last year and develop some power standards. Again, some of this has been interrupted due to the lack of substitutes. These next few slides are the slides that I was referring to earlier. They are proposals that affect multiple sites in the district. So for Seoul, you can see a reading program called Reading A to Z. This is an online reading program that gives text at a student's independent reading level. SSS was the student support system with Ms. Cron. We have been able to provide them funding so that our social workers and our counselors and our assistant principals as well as principals can get training on restorative justice, PBIS, crisis prevention. Mr. Williamson has worked with various teachers on the DBQ project, which is the document-based questioning. Ms. Brown was able to provide gifted materials that otherwise weren't able to be purchased. Ms. Kaiser has worked with several of our 7th grade science teachers in partnership with McDowell Sonoran Conservancy, and they've actually taken some outdoor professional development at the Conservancy and worked on developing units for their life science program. It will culminate in a field trip for those 7th graders where they can practice and they can learn about some of the things that they may have missed last year when we were in remote learning. Navajo and Laguna, as you can see, also had the mobile STEM lab, and this was really quite an in-depth, and I think I've included some of that information in your backup, quite an in-depth endeavor for these schools, and the feedback has been tremendous. I think we are starting to spread that, and word is spreading at other campuses that they would like to explore this activity as well. Mr. Crozier wrote a proposal for a math specialist at our Title I buildings. Once again, we are looking for really qualified math individuals, math specialists, for these positions. So not all of the positions have been filled at this time. We had a kindergarten teacher, Allie Ellis, write a proposal to help develop fine motor skills that we know the teachers noticed were lacking due to some of the lack of experiences that some of the students have had. So we purchased loop scissors and stringing beads and pencil grips and lace-up cards and hole punches, and we are in the process of getting those in and assembling kits so that students will have those for stations in the classroom. So we're excited about that. Shipping was a little bit of a challenge there, but we're getting those in slowly but surely. And then we'll continue to help provide funds for Beyond Move On when reading with Ms. Cerna, who wrote a proposal for that as we continue. That is servicing many of our students as well as providing some professional development for our teachers. Now I'm going to just turn it over to our district elementary ELA coach, Diane Murphy, with some exciting news about some of our iReady and FastBridge application.
Thank you. We're not able to go into detail with each of the plans tonight, so we wanted to share one of the site-based Esser examples from Desert Mountain Complex. Laguna proposed, was approved, and was funded a 0.5 reading specialist, with the impact of the specialist being measured using FastBridge screening and progress monitoring scores. Although mid-year testing has just begun, just like last week, we wanted to share some preliminary data with you to demonstrate the impact of the reading specialist at Laguna. Several reports in FastBridge focus on student growth. This is an example of one growth graph that shows that all second graders who have been tested so far have made growth from the beginning of the year to mid-year testing. Of the second graders already tested, 13% have made aggressive growth, which is between the 85th to 99th percentile. 50% of students made typical growth, which is between the 30th and 84th percentile. 38% of the students made modest growth between the 20th and 30th percentile, with no students making flat growth. This is an example of a progress monitoring graph of one of the second grade Laguna students who did make aggressive growth. This child's score increased from 34 at the beginning of the year to 91 during the mid-year testing. That resulted in a weekly score growth of 2.69 per week, which placed the child at the 92nd percentile of growth, meaning the child had exceeded the growth of 92% of students with a similar score history. Because of this growth, this child has gone from being at risk to now being at low to no risk. FastBridge also provides teachers with a projected end-of-year score, a projected growth rate, and the needed instructional pacing in order to meet benchmark scores by the end of the school year. Based on this child's current score and first semester growth rate, he is predicted to exceed the end-of-year benchmark. Through daily targeted intervention lessons and weekly progress monitoring testing, the Esser-funded reading specialist Laguna has been able to target instruction needs for students and impact their academic growth. And now Mrs. Spagola will wrap this presentation up.
So we are anxiously awaiting the testing to finish, the benchmarks to finish, looking at this data to see where we're at, what's working, what needs some tweaking, where we can spread the good news and the good work being done, and really look at the effectiveness of our implementation. We won't have to wait a whole year to figure that out. We can start looking in just a couple of weeks. We're going to look at our strategic planning goals that you have all worked on during the strategic planning process, and we're going to match those with our work and use our Esser funds to help us achieve those goals and commitments that you've set forth in your strategic plan. And we're going to continue to seek our stakeholder growth, our stakeholder input for our priorities for Esser resources. I'll continue to meet on various instances. I've met one-on-one with parents who have said they have an idea or they wish we could do something. So we meet one-on-one, and I take it to the various sources, and we either look at Esser funds, or sometimes it's not a matter of funding, it's just a matter of implementing something and addressing a need and filling that need. So we're going to continue to do that as well. And now I'll answer any questions you may have.
Do any of the governing board members have questions, comments, concerns? Vice President Hartwells?
Thank you. Thank you, Alice, for the presentation. I had just a few clarification questions for myself, so I didn't have a chance to circle back with Shannon. Total expenditures in the charts, the first part of the presentation, that's for fiscal year 2021?
Yes.
Yes, okay. And then could you clarify what the COVID positions are?
The
At least-
COVID positions?
Yes, so say, for example, chart slide 3.
Those I would have to get,
So that would include not only our COVID specialist, but we had a half-time administrative support position allocated to every building to assist with data collection. Is there anything else I'm missing, Dr. Bowman? Okay, it's those part-time positions plus the COVID specialist.
Okay, thank you. And then I think that you gave us the breakdown of the facilities expenditures. I just want to make sure my notes were correct here. Water stations, electrostatic sprayers, and extra chairs and desks for the social distancing in the classrooms.
correct, as well as the HEPA filters.
Oh, okay, the MERV 13. And then, just to clarify, I think I jotted this down, because I believe you did say that the online learning, this is in the Esser 3 expenditure. So chart.
Yes.
6, slide 6. The online learning, that was for additional staff in Scottsdale Online Learning, is that
Correct.
Okay. And how many staff was that additional?
I believe it was 7, but I would have to get with Shannon to
Okay.
just verify that.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. And then I just have a comment. Thank you so much to all of the teachers and staff who submitted proposals and were thinking, in a way that was productive and like you always do, but taking that extra time and effort to put these proposals together. I think there's a lot of really great things here. I particularly liked seeing also partnerships with existing entities, the McDowell Sonoran Conservancy, the STEM Labs. It's outstanding. So thank you to all of you for those ideas, your creativity, and your efforts. And thank you, Alice.
Other questions? Yes. Board Member Beckman.
Okay, so I have a couple. So I seem to notice, and I've called around and talked to a few of our sites with regard to need and what they submitted proposals for. And a common theme, what actually happens to correlate with our scores, is math specialists. So while I'm thrilled to see that we are seeking out math specialists for each of our sites, it's difficult for me to absorb the fact that we can't find them. I understand that there is a labor shortage. I understand it's difficult to find the right talent. But I guess I would ask, how can we do a better job at trying to find them? Is it going to require money? Because to me, with this amount of funding, the number one issue is in our classroom with our kids. And if we are having a difficult finding them, how can we up the ante to where we can actually do that? So it's not necessarily an ask for you to answer today, a question, but something to think about, because I have talked to a couple of principals, et cetera, and that seems to be a common need as I look through this proposal, et cetera. And when we look at, like I said, our scores previously, we know we have a hard time with math, and I can only imagine where we are now. And then that leads me into the next part, which happens to be the tutoring aspect. And when I look at our elementary level, our middle school level, and our high school level, I noticed that at the middle school level, we really were not taking advantage of that tutoring that is being offered to our families as much as we could be. So there seems to be a disconnect in why. Are parents not, they have to be aware, but to some extent, we have it on the website. And I know we have put out blurbs in our communication about it, but something's going on. When we only have that limited of hours being used, and we know our kids are not doing well in math historically, and most likely right now, what can we do to get the tutoring in front of them more? Is it going to require us upping the ante to find those math specialists so that they not only help our kids, but they also identify them and then put them in front of tutoring? I don't know, but it seems to be a significant problem. So the math for me with this funding available is a priority. So we need to find the talent, and then we need to get in front of those families to let them know that we have resources available and make sure that they take advantage of those resources. Because when I looked at the data, I think we had 4.5 hours used for October and November for all of our middle schools in tutoring. And that to me was unacceptable, especially since it's free. So that's a big point for me. Also, with regard to the proposals, are we taking a look at some of the proposals and identifying a fantastic idea that one learning community may have proposed and been approved for that might actually benefit the other learning communities and letting them know about it? Like these calming stations seems to be a great idea. I mean, is that something that we're reaching out maybe to the other schools and saying, there are funds available, this might benefit you as well?
And the answer is yes.
Okay.
Once those stations have just gotten up in, I think, November, we will be going to the principals and saying, these are stations that we've seen with our data that are working. We see these many students are using it. These are some of the changes we might suggest you make, and then we can replicate those. That's a definite. And if I may just, as I try to problem solve some of these issues as well, looking at the math specialists, I do believe we have to look at that early. We have to continue looking this year, but we have to really look during the summer early in that job bank when those candidates are more of a surplus, if you will, if anything is a surplus in education right now. But when there's more people available in the summer, so we can capture them earlier rather than later. Because that's a specific skill set we're looking for, obviously, and I'm sure we're not the only district. So that is one suggestion I would have, is that we continue to look at that. Just because we haven't been able to fill it as of yet, it doesn't mean we should stop looking. We're still going to continue to need that, and we still should continue to look for that in the summer.
Okay.
The other, about the middle school, Mrs. Stoller-Slover and myself were discussing going over to address it with the principals, just seeing what can we do to help pique that interest, increase the awareness of the tutoring and the availability of the tutoring for the students. So how can we help get that information out as well?
And I appreciate that, because I think it would be very helpful to identify them, obviously, and work towards having someone set them up on a schedule, not just take an hour before an exam or whatever. Get those kids that are behind set up with an every night on Monday from 7 to 8 p.m. or something with either varsity or or their teacher, et cetera, whatever it takes. But thank you. I would like to hear back, I'm sure the whole board would, on when you reach out to that talent, because these funds go on for many years. So if we get in front of it, we should be able to maybe be proactive. I don't know if it's going to require us to pay a little more, but whatever it takes, that has to be a priority. One last question with regard to this PP&E, and this might be a Sean question. It looks like we have only $10,000. I'm not suggesting we spend more. I'm just asking where it is, because this is showing that we've spent $10,000 in total on PPE, and I'm wondering if it's in a subset of somewhere else.
I will have to defer to,
Mr. Crozier?
yes, Ms. Crozier
Okay.
for that. I don't want to give misinformation.
Okay.
I apologize.
If he can-
So,
back
so
to me. That's-
Shannon will actually respond
Yeah, and
in
that's
email
fine.
to the governing board on that. It looks like 10,000 from ESSER 3. So if you look at
Right.
where most of our PPE expenditures were from, it's from ESSER 1 and ESSER 2 at the front end of the pandemic. So it's not a surprise that we have a smaller amount spent in this third allocation.
But that was my point. I don't see it line itemed in ESSER 1 or 2
Got it.
in this. So if she could show me, maybe it's
Sure.
consolidated with some of our site level stuff. I don't know, but I would just be interested. And it doesn't have to be answered tonight, but if she can just get me an answer, that would be great.
And
Will
it
do.
might be included in facilities at
Right.
the time. I remember that discussion as well as building principal last year.
Okay, thank you.
Other board member question, comments? Yes, Vice President Hart-Wells.
As a kind of in the encumbrances, I was curious if you could, or if one of your colleagues could comment on what the facilities expenditures for air exchange, air filtration will be beyond, if it's going to be the same kind of itemized list that you gave me before, or are we going to double down in any particular area of facilities?
So I don't know if Dennis is in the cloud or not. So I want to check and see if he's there before I weigh in.
I'm asking specifically about PPE.
Right.
Kind of what that means going forward.
So we're continuing. We've got the quarterly exchange of the MERV 13 filters in our normal air handling units. You have in the room tonight 2 Corsi Rosenthal boxes that were put together by our facilities team. One to see how long it took to put them together and to gather what the costs are. So we're looking at that as a potential additional mitigation measure as well. Dennis is working with the Operations and Facilities Committee on an ongoing basis to look at what other strategies might be appropriate to ensure that we're addressing the concerns in terms of mitigating spread of COVID in the classrooms.
Thank you. Is there a means, a mechanism, I'm sure that there is, but if you could just clarify, by which teachers and staff could request specific PPE for their classrooms?
Can you give an example of what you're talking about?
Well,
Like a Corsi
if I
Rosenthal?
want to do this in my science class as a project, or I just want an air filter, or I want something specific for myself, for my students, whatever grade level, is there a mechanism by which, or is that through the process of asking the administration at the respective building? Could you just walk through how easy is that for someone to do?
So the request should go through the facilities department. One of the challenges that we have is that if people bring different kinds of equipment, wherever they procured it from, the ability of the district to maintain or support whatever that equipment can be is difficult. So having some standardization in the process is important.
Sure.
That's why looking at, what is effective, because a lot of times people might bring something in that may not be as effective as something else, and so that's why we want to streamline it through the facilities department. I don't know if Mr. Rayler wants it submitted through School Dude, which is how we do many of our facilities requests, or if he's got another approach that he would like, but we can make that information available.
Thank you. I'm wondering if the weekly communication that is sent out could include that process, just to make sure that that communication is fluid and everybody knows where to go, what link to click on to make requests. Thank you.
Board Member Lindsay, do you have anything to add? Any questions?
I'd just be curious, Is there any way to maybe get a little, I mean, I'm looking at the individual site proposals that have been approved. Is there a way to encourage more sites to submit?
Yes, and as I mentioned, we're going to be going back to the principals. We presented to the principals before. We're going to go back with the latest proposals. There's been a few that have been acquired since then, plus we have data to show what's been working and spread the good news.
Okay, yeah, just because like Sorora's a little alarming. There's only one school that's had a proposal approved, so.
Right, but they have had, as I mentioned before, Navajo did do the STEM lab as well, and they all have been using the iReady.
Okay, thanks.
You're welcome.
Board Member Greenberg?
Thank you. In following up on Board Member Beckman's questions, I would like to know the specific number of subject matter experts in math and otherwise that we reach out to.
Sure.
And the reasons as to why. I would like to collect that data because I think it goes far beyond this district and money. I think working conditions are a significant issue. We also continue to have a 2,000 teacher shortage that is only going to increase as we've seen other states having to deal with that as well. People just don't want to enter this profession, and I could not imagine why. If we could get that information on who we reach out to, how we reach out to them, number of people we communicate with, and if they do communicate back the reasons why or why not they want to make that move, I would appreciate that.
Sure.
Thank you.
I would like to thank you, Ms. Spingola and Diane Murphy for your assistance with presenting this information. It is really important. It was exciting to see the growth of the student example of what we're doing is having an impact. I think that's important to all of us here. I also really appreciated the comments from my colleagues here on the governing board. The issue with hiring, I think, is something we need to not examine as a hiring during the summer or spring or whatever, but it needs to be year-round. And so whatever we can do to entice qualified candidates to not just be hired in our district, but stay in our district, I think that is something that it will help our students ultimately. So I do appreciate all of the work that's gone into this presentation, and I look forward to receiving additional updates. Any
Sure.
other questions, comments, concerns on this topic?
I'll just add one thing.
Yes.
A few of the principals have creatively tried to solve the situation with math and have used some math teachers as willing to do a 6/5 and be able to take an extra class to help with those students that need the extra support. So our teachers continue to go above and beyond to help our students.
Of course, and I appreciate those teachers that are willing to serve a 6/5 contract for the general public that is listening or paying attention. That means a teacher goes from the start of the day to the end of the day without a break, basically. And it wears out our teachers. The money's nice, but there are issues with longevity with that. So it's great that teachers are willing to do that, but I question the practice personally. And I think as a district, again, we need to be focusing on retaining and caring for our teachers, and giving them a break during the day is one way to do that.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, so thank you for your presentations. At this time, we will move on to action items. 5A, selection of a delegate and alternate to the Arizona School Board Association as the delegate assembly. And I assume Dr. Menzel, are you taking the lead on this?
Essentially, we just need a board member to volunteer to serve as a delegate and commit to go to the meeting, and someone to serve as an alternate. And I don't know if there's any interest on the part of the board. I believe you served as our delegate last year.
Yes.
Maybe you could make a sales pitch for why someone might want to do that.
Well, I absolutely can. The Arizona School Board Association is a great professional development organization. They also provide us with their policy work. And I would like for someone else to volunteer for this position. I do plan on participating as well, but I think the more the merrier when it comes to that. So Vice President Hartwells?
I'd like to self-nominate. I do have some experience in policy, and I hope that folks have recognized that I do read closely the policies, and I'd like to bring a fresh perspective. And I did attend both of the conferences in the fall. I do have a little bit of familiarity how it goes. So to that end, I would happily volunteer to take the position for the year.
Can I have a second on that motion?
Second.
Board Member Beckman seconds your nomination. And let's take a vote on that. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Dr. Hartwells, congratulations. Do we need a backup?
Yes, we need to appoint an alternate, just in case
Alternate?
something came
Okay.
up and she was unable to attend. We'd still want to be represented for voting purposes.
Thank you. Would anyone like to self-nominate to be the alternate for that position? Well, then I will speak up and be nominate myself to be the alternate for that position.
I second.
Thank you for seconding that motion. Board Member Greenberg? All in favor of that motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Nope, that motion passes 5-0 as well. All right, we will move on to the approval. Action item 5B, approval of the Coronado Learning Community Proposed Restructure Plan. I believe Dr. Hagigat will be leading that presentation.
Yes, and we do have representation from the Coronado Learning Complex as well that will be supporting in the presentation and answering questions.
Super. Dr. Hagigat.
Good evening, President Sanowski. Congratulations. Vice President Hartwells, congratulations. Member of the board, Dr. Menzel, and Ms. Wagner. This evening, we return to you seeking approval for the restructure of the Coronado Learning Community to include a standalone middle school. I want to acknowledge again the Coronado Learning Community team that has been key to this process, including Dr. Sackles, Assistant Superintendent for Secondary, Ms. Margaret Cerna, Title I Executive Director, Mr. Sean Crozier, Title I Coordinator, Ms. Amy Palatucci, Principal at Coronado High School, Mr. Rantella, Principal at Hohokam, and also join us virtually, we have Mr. Hoda, Principal at Pima Traditional, and Dr. David Perniski, Principal at Tonalea. And of course, I want to thank Dr. Menzel for his guidance and support during this process. Our goal continues to be to ensure a vibrant and viable Coronado learning community. Phase 1 solves the current problem of limited program capacity in the middle grades. If Phase 1 is approved by you tonight, we will promptly begin our work in Phase 2. Phase 2 promotes programs at all levels and allows for a collaborative approach to determine if additional programs are needed to be considered to enhance our current offering. Phase 2 also includes aggressive marketing that will be accomplished through electronic, digital, and print-based advertising. Phase 1 is specific to creating a structure that allows for program capacity in grades 6 through 8 at Tonalea. The diagram shows the restructure with a standalone middle school. Along with the diagram, you see the staff and parent input received regarding the restructure recommendation. For this team, it has been key to receive stakeholder input and feedback every step of the way during this process. Board member feedback from November 30th, 2021, the board presentation also included more detail regarding estimate cost and desired growth and staffing. What you can see up here, which was also shared with you earlier, is that the estimated cost is under $1 million. You will notice staffing added cost, which is about $275,000 and $541,000 for a one-time cost. After discussion with our board member Hartwells, we went ahead and added a contingency of $100,000 that you will see there at the bottom to address any unforeseen costs that we didn't anticipate. And then also another request was to show the desirable growth. We are looking at approximately a 3% loss during the transition. It's something that we've seen in other places, but we also are looking at a 5% gain in years 2 through years 5. And lastly, staffing, we are going to be using a collaborative effort where we will be able to identify preference of teachers and staff, address the guidelines and the policies that we currently have in place, and accomplish all this in a timely manner where teachers know where they will be in the near future. An initial interest parent survey was administered in December to have a better idea regarding what enrollment we could expect in the 22-23 school year at Yavapai for students coming from Tonalea K-5, students returning to Yavapai from Hohokam, and incoming 6th to 8th grade students attending Tonalea as a standalone middle school. The December 10th, 2021 student count was utilized to distribute surveys. 665 future Tonalea K families received a survey, and 313 responded, about 47%. 167 future Yavapai K-5 families received the survey, and 66 responded, about 40%. From those that responded, we learned that our community is aware of this proposed change, and we project the majority of the parents of the incoming pre-K through 5th grade students from Tonalea will continue their education at Yavapai if Tonalea becomes a standalone middle school. Some students currently attending Hohokam from the Yavapai attending area will return to Yavapai from Hoho. And in the middle grades, we anticipate the majority of the incoming 6th through 8th grade attend Tonalea as a standalone middle school. Again, here the table shows some of the breakdown, and we know that it's teeny tiny. You had an opportunity to see it earlier, and this shows the breakdown by grade level and school. The transition plan has been shared with the community, with the Coronado Learning Community and our SUSD governing board. Coronado High School will be serving students in grades 9 through 12. Tonalea would only serve students in 6 through 8, and Hohokam, Pima Traditional, and Yavapai will serve students pre-K through 5th grade. As a reminder, transportation will be provided for 1 year for students attending Hohokam that are from Yavapai. So we look forward to the next steps of Phase 1 that include our focus on staffing, a smooth transition of staff and students to the Yavapai, and making sure that our Tonalea students are ready to transition to a 6th grade standalone middle school. So with that, I open up for questions and comments. Thank you.
Board members, comments, questions? Board Member Beckman.
Because this proposal is out there, and then we have a slide in there with regard to costs, I want to be fully transparent and kind of give my thoughts on, for a minute on the costs. If we begin with the staffing costs, let's be clear, we have not voted on a closure of Yavapai, nor has it been suggested. It is in a temporary state, so administrative costs need to be a part of the budget. Whether or not we actually spend the money or incur the expense is a different story. We cannot pretend Yavapai is closed and we will never have any administrative costs at all. And then if we approve this proposal, have it be a K-5 again, the costs are additional to the budget. Currently, we are realizing a temporary savings to the budget because we have not realized the staffing expenses. The same with the technology expense. Yavapai is one of our schools, and from an equity perspective, we would have scheduled an IT update, smart boards, et cetera, along with the rest of the district. It has not become an additional expense. It does not become an additional expense if this is approved. If not approved, it becomes a savings because the money is not spent or expensed. In summary, we are acting as if Yavapai is closed and we are incurring a brand new administrative cost with this proposal. That is simply not the case. So moving on to furniture, we have an expense projection of $80,000. But currently, we have a seat and furniture for every student in the district. including the middle schoolers at Tonalea. So if you were going to project $80,000 in additional costs, it would be because you project a need for increased bodies or ADM. Where is the projected revenue to offset this cost? So if we bring in additional students that require furniture, they bring funding with them. So this cost gets offset by the revenue. The only real, true, and transparent expenses here that I see moving forward are $60,000 for the move, rebranding of $6,000, and marketing to the new structure of $20,000, so $86,000 in total. I wanted to just give you my perspective on that so that the public just doesn't look at this immediately and think that this on the surface is $916,000.
Thank you very much,
Appreciate
Board Member Beckman. Other comments? Questions, concerns, Board Member Greenberg?
I would follow up on Board Member Beckman's comment that anyone who feels that moving students back to Yavapai, rebranding it, providing them up-to-date technology so that they have the same high learning experience that other students in our district have, anyone who looks at that and thinks that is the wrong move is very sad in my mind. As I've mentioned before, I believe that the Coronado learning community has been seriously neglected for decades here. And attending a school on a rainy day and it flooding inside the school is an unacceptable learning environment. Thankfully, this board has fixed that, but it took Principal Palatucci and many administrations a long time to get that done. I think that, while I don't know what the future of Coronado holds, I believe investing in it is the right decision at this time. And I believe that by providing a dedicated middle school, that is something that will appeal to parents and students alike. And I'm very hopeful that this works because I think nothing could be better than the diversity that our students and staff bring. And Coronado is certainly a gem in the crown in that regard. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Greenberg. Vice President Hartwells?
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hagiga, and to all of you that spent some time with me on Friday going through some questions, more of a holistic set of questions. And I'll just reiterate for the public what I shared with you, which is that I am supportive to bring a multifaceted set of solutions and opportunity into the Coronado Learning Complex. But I also want to enforce the importance of the holistic approach that's informed by demographics and data and fiscal responsibility as we stare down our fact pattern as it is. More specifically, encouraging inclusion, and which I know is going to happen and has happened and will continue to do so, voices that kind of pressure test proposals and new voices that reflect the Coronado Learning Complex's diversity, which I strongly feel is a strength. So to that end, I do recognize maybe the proposal it may not be perfect, it may not have answered every single question. However, in business, there's often an old adage that you don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. So lastly, my support, however, is on this first phase of the restructure, it is conditioned on a budget cap. And that is in large part not because I think that this is going to be a runaway cost or expenditure or not get offset as Board Member Beckman described, but because of our fact pattern and how we sit today in the state of Arizona as a district public school with an aggregate expenditure limit cap on the horizon being hit. So that's the reason. It's certainly not specific, but it's because it's the bigger picture of what we're dealing with. So again, thank you for all your time and energy and continued commitment to doing this, putting the restructure in place and to the Coronado Learning Complex. I share the sentiment of the complex and its value.
Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Hartwells. Board Member Lindsay, do you have anything to add?
Just that I support all the comments that have been made, and to me, it's common sense to have a learning community have a middle school. It's the only learning community that does not have a 6-8 middle school, so it's just common sense to give them one. I don't know how
appreciate-
you have the proper growth
Yeah,
without that, so.
I appreciate that input. Thank you.
Thank you.
I also really have appreciated the variety of conversations that have taken place to put this together. I appreciate thinking differently and doing things differently. And from our conversations, you have been open to input, and I appreciate that. I think what we've been given tonight creates a comprehensive picture, and I appreciate that. Any other comments from governing board members? Dr. Menzel? Nope. Okay, at this time, I would like to call upon the board members to, someone to put forward a motion to approve the Coronado Learning Community proposed restructure plan.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Moved by Board Member Greenberg, seconded by Board Member Beckman. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
My,
Board Member Hartwells.
I vote aye, conditioned that the budget that's proposed tonight is fixed, is a cap.
Pardon? Yes.
I believe that has to be motioned as a separate motion. It's different than the first motion that you have on the table. So you need to finish.
If I may, what is the proposed budget here, including the contingency?
Yeah, finish.
Finish this vote out.
Okay.
Okay. Any?
No.
Okay, so we have a 4-1 vote in favor of approving the Coronado Learning Community proposed restructure plan.
I move to approve the Coronado Learning Community restructure plan with a budget cap of $916,000, unless the board moves.
I'm confused. So, well, first, the amount is 916,506, but isn't the budget that we're approving, this is the expenditure that we're approving? Is that wrong?
That's the expenditure estimate. As I understood, what Dr. Hartwells was suggesting was that moving forward with implementation was predicated on a state budget resolution to the aggregate expenditure limit. That's what I thought I heard.
No.
No.
No. My vote, I want to support this proposal, but I want the proposal to have a fixed number.
Cap on how much you spend.
Cap on expenditure unless the board approves additional expenditures, but does so transparently.
So are you suggesting that we approve this based on a $916,000 cap for everything associated with this proposal, but if there's additional expenses, it comes back to the board for approval?
I am.
So make that as a motion.
I move to approve the Coronado Learning Complex, Coronado Learning Community restructure proposal with a cap of $916,506 in expenditures.
Do we have a second for that motion? No second? So the motion fails.
Oh, I do have a question.
Board Member
I would
Beckman.
ask that, and Lori, I would need you to weigh in here, because I understand where you're going and I agree with it. However, I think we lack the content necessary right now to proceed with that, meaning I would like, when you ask for this motion and you ask for this to be the cap, I feel like there's no duration to it either, meaning these administrative costs are clearly identified for like 1 year. I mean, the administrative costs, et cetera, and they're part of this $916,000. So I think we need a little more context to that type of vote, meaning is it going to be $916,000 for the move plus the first year of additional costs for administration? Or is it going to be, do you see what I'm saying? That I think if you're going to put a cap on it, it needs to be a little more comprehensive and then lay that out and then say if anything beyond this would need to come back to the board for approval.
So I'm not exactly sure why that's my job. So
It's
the
not.
proposal before us is to move Yavapai back to Yavapai students, allow TK8 to become a full-fledged middle school, and alleviate the pressure on the Coronado Learning Complex at the middle school, that rate limiting step at that grade level. I am supportive of that. Because we are in a situation where we are going to have to make cuts if something doesn't happen at the state legislature, because of the aggregate expenditure limit, which has nothing to do with the Coronado Learning Complex proposal. It seems fiscally responsible to me to have some structure around the amount of expenditures that will be made to complete phase one only. And what we're looking at on this slide is a proposal of how much that's going to cost.
So
Counselor
what's on the agenda for this evening is the request for approval of the project. It's not the cost of the project. So what you're approving is the project itself. If your vote is contingent upon something that's a modification, then you've already voted to approve the project.
Correct.
When it comes before you on contracts and budgets, or when a different subject comes before of what we're going to do if we fall off the fiscal cliff, so to speak, that's a separate, as I'm hearing it, and maybe I'm misunderstanding, that seems to be a separate agenda item that's not appropriate to lump in with this single line item on the agenda.
And Counselor, may I add that this states that it's an estimated reopen additional cost. And it's an estimate for us to consider in order to, which we already did, we approved the proposal restructured plan. So this is just giving us a ballpark figure, and of course, those expenditures would be part of future decisions that this board makes.
Correct.
And I appreciate what Dr. Hartwells is saying greatly, but those would be additional decisions for us to deal with when that time comes.
That's how I'm understanding the request, but if I'm misunderstanding it, I am certainly,
Right,
If I may,
Yes.
just in very simplistic terms, none of this, the financial matter would not be a discussion of topic at all if the board, upon reviewing this plan, said, no, we don't want to at all move forward with this proposal. We don't care that there's no middle school there, or we like how things are organized there, or what have you. So this is a policy proposal, if you will, insofar as it's saying we would like to proceed on this basis. Can we proceed and start evaluating this? If it turns out down the line that the aggregate expenditure limit is not extended for this year, or potentially next year, they can only do it 1 year at a time, or B, these costs, even if it is $916,000, are simply something we cannot afford because of other circumstances, then it doesn't go forward. The administration's not going to spend money that we do not have. We're not legally allowed to do that. So I understand what is being said here, but this was just a vote on, do we agree with this concept of moving this, and one of the factors is the potential fiscal responsibility here. And I feel that Board Member Beckman laid out a very good explanation as to why these expenditures make sense. So that this wasn't a vote on anything beyond that.
Vice President Hartwells?
Thank you. Ms. Bird, could you clarify then? So the vote on approval doesn't authorize the staff to start doing anything?
it does authorize the staff, as I understand the proposal, to move to phase two, which is really the starting to implement the plan. There's no way to nail down the costs at this point, and some of those costs will come before you should you need to start considering if the debt limit or the aggregate expenditure limit isn't raised and you have to start making those decisions, that would be a completely different set of proposals and considerations. Based on this estimate, would you vote to move forward with this plan, and knowing that it's an estimate? I mean, you're knowing that it's an estimate. Are you in favor of the concept and allowing the staff to move forward with, I believe it's phase 2, is that correct, Doctor? With phase 2 of this plan? That's what's noticed on the agenda.
Vice President Hartwells, do you have anything else to add? No?
No, I don't particularly understand why in an approval of a proposal that we're not permitted to make sure that the estimated costs, that we're accountable going forward to the estimated costs, and the approval allows, I hope, the move to start to be effected, which costs money. So I don't understand how this approval can mean not an approval for expenditures to be expended.
Well, so let me add to Superintendent Menzel's point. Is your concern that the aggregate control, if the aggregate control limit cap was extended by the legislature, would you still want to impose a $916,000 cap?
Well, that's not the fact pattern we're working under today. I only can deal with what we have before us today, which is right now we have a cap that will be exceeded.
Well, if the cap doesn't get extended, we can't do this or a lot of projects. So not.
What I'm trying to avoid is just that, is if we approve this and momentum starts to build and we start to go down this road and money is expended, and then we have to say, wait a minute, red light this, that would be very non-ideal. I don't think that's what anyone's intending with their yes vote, right, is to pull this back.
So in terms of the timeline, the legislature has to act by March 1st to address the issue of the aggregate expenditure limit. We will begin the process of identifying staffing. This is a good slide to have up because there are a lot of moving parts and pieces related to what it takes to shift staffing from Tonalea K-8 to Yavapai, and considering those who may be at Hohokam that may want to go back to Yavapai that were part of that combined school for a couple of years. So that process has to start. We'll know by March 1st whether or not the legislature has acted. We are obligated then, if they fail to act, to produce a revised budget by April 1st. So that this then becomes relevant in terms of our ability to implement the restructuring proposal that was approved by the governing board tonight, and we would have to bring that back to you.
And other things I might add.
Oh, yeah, this would not be the only thing. It's a $27 million plus hit to Scottsdale Unified School District if the legislature doesn't act.
And if I may, it's a yearly extension. So they could act this year by extending it. We could implement this proposal, and then next year they could not extend it. So we have no control over that aspect. So I guess to the point is, if this is estimated to cost $916,000, again, with the points that Board Member Beckman made, and we think that based on financial projections, this is a fiscally responsible thing to do, that we can increase enrollment within the Coronado learning community, we can create programs and really provide the support that they need, then I don't see a reason not to support it on that basis.
Any other comments? Yes.
Well, my comment is the reason is we know we do not have a fiscal surplus. We are staring at cuts if something doesn't happen. So today, the fact pattern is that the cap will be exceeded. We know that.
But if we don't,
I realize
we can't start doing this on March 2nd. if they approve the cap on March 1st. We would be delayed another year in trying to implement this. We have to start at least laying the foundation now in the hopes that it does get extended, because if it doesn't, then this isn't happening next year.
Correct.
President Hurtwells?
Thank you for recognizing me, and I was not finished speaking. I am offering a path forward today, one that is gated and has a runway of a certain amount of money. I'm not opposing the proposal. I'm offering up a pathway that, in my view, and maybe you don't agree, and that is fine, has some financial guardrails. That's all.
As a point of order, Board Member Hartwells, you could make a motion that asks the board to put a limit, a spending limit, and I don't know how you're going to arrive at that limit based on the estimate, since we don't really have, I mean, it's an estimate, but you could make a motion, put it before your colleagues to, now that we've approved the project, you could make a second motion to put a spending limit on that, and then see if you get a second, and then vote. I mean, but it's got to be done in an orderly way, because you've already voted to
Correct.
approve the concept.
Correct. So, Vice President Hartwells, would you like to make that proposal?
I'd like to make a motion to the approved Coronado Learning Community restructure proposal for Phase 1, that there be an expenditure cap, that if it is to be exceeded, that the board be asked for further approval of $916,000.
Do I have a second on that motion? That motion fails. Oh, yeah, right, we don't have a second, so we don't vote. Got it, thank you. Well, I just want to make comment that I appreciate this rich conversation. This is what this meeting, I see, is for. The discussions need to be, they need to happen. And so I appreciate the conversation, I appreciate the presentation, but this conversation about finances, yes, it's an estimate. Yes, we have approved this proposal for the Coronado Learning Community Restructure Plan. I assume that we will, moving forward, be brought forth any financial issues to approve as we normally do.
Yes.
Any other questions, comments? Yes.
Is it not the case that, we have to approve employees' contracts, right? We can't just hire people based on this. They have to come back to the board, we have to hire, so pretty much every element of the expenditures here are things that we have to approve separately, unless, of course, they don't hit the limits or aren't required by law that the board approve.
Well,
But
all of the practices and policies of the board related to staffing, procurement, and any other will come before the board as it normally would, just like it would in any other project, would be the expected way to proceed on this.
Okay, thank you.
Super. So one last thing, I can appreciate where Vice President Hartwells is coming from. I think, in all fairness, she's trying to say that there has to be some boundaries. We have had some, best practice would dictate, here's your cap. This is a project we approve. Don't just go off and spend more and then come back to us and say, guess what, we spent more. There was something that the board had approved based on a premise, and it was provided for us. However, where my concern, not to reopen this whole thing, but I will get to my point, is some of these expenses are not one and done, and they were just administrative costs based on just a quick analysis of what it might take to proceed with this project. So I feel like if that question had been asked prior to the meeting today, to have these laid out with that type of thing in mind, we would have a better idea of what we were approving and what the cap would look like. So it's not a topic that I wouldn't mind revisiting it if possible, as, you know, at the next meeting or something going forward, that we have some sort of limitations on this for approval, because in theory, I agree. You don't want another meeting from our previous audit, for example, where we find out that there were additional expenses incurred that we weren't aware of, but because we gave approval to this project, then they just happened. And I understand Board Member Greenberg's point that these are yearly contracts that are going to keep coming back to the board for approval, et cetera. So they would be approved in that context, yes.
And to build on that, we don't require a cap on any other school. And we also don't know if this is successful, to, you know, several years that we're trying to project out here, if it is as successful as I hope it is, the expenses are naturally going to go up over any cap we set, because we're going to have more employees that we have to hire, or we have more projects that we're paying for, lab equipment, what have you, technology. So it's really, if I just think that, I agree. I don't think that it's possible right now to put a cap in on something like that. But
Vice President Hartwells?
Thank you. I just want to clarify, this is not a proposed cap on any school. This is a proposed cap for total estimated costs of a Phase 1 on this restructure proposal.
Great, rich conversation to start off our new year. Excellent. If there are no other comments or questions about this or anything we've discussed, I would like to move to adjourn this special meeting.
Thank you.
What was that? I move to adjourn this special meeting of the Scottsdale Unified School District Number 848 Governing Board. It is January 11th at 7:43 p.m. Do I have a second?
second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Meeting is adjourned.